Hello and welcome to the channel. You all know me, Joseph Carroll, but I have a special guest today for episode number 8 of A More Than Human Conversation. I have a man who is trying to take common and sense and mold them back together when it comes to media, TV, games, and all that. Welcome, Greg Owen.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So the way I found you, Greg, is my best friend, I don't know, a few months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, was like, he'll just send me random stuff. He'll be like, oh, this is cool, that's cool. And then like he just kept sending me your videos. And I was like, all right, man, like I gotta check this. I gotta check this guy out for real, not just like watch his stuff whenever it gets sent to me. So I started watching, your stuff, and especially your stuff on like Disney and Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this guy knows, like, what's going on. Like, and it's, some people seem to be like all the way on one side, all the way on the other. And like, we all know stuff it's in the middle. Like, and you're able to find that nice balance of common sense when it comes to what things they ought to be doing, not be doing. But you do a lot of stuff on your channel. Do you consider yourself a reviewer or like a social commentator? Like, where do you?
I like the commentator more. I do the review stuff. I don't want to say as like a filler, but that's more of like a bonus. If I have time to go see something, I'll review it. If if there's just something I just happen to see, I'll review it. Like if it's just kind of convenient, I'll do that. But to be honest, I don't enjoy them as much because it's just, I don't know. There's just really not much to say. It's just I kind of give a plot summary and here's what I like, here's what I didn't like, kind of thing. I don't know. I much prefer the commentary. I like to delve into the themes of stuff. Personally, I enjoy that more. So yeah, I mean, yeah, the reviews help fill out the content. They fill out the channel and stuff. It's part of the business, but it's not what I want to be 100% known for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like we were kind of talking before we jumped on the live here, is like some of my favorite stuff of yours is your social commentary. I just watched a couple of days ago. You did like the AI apocalypse when it comes to like I mean, I love that kind of stuff. I mean, so what made you like want to get into being a YouTuber, being a social commentator and that stuff?
Honestly, some of it was just like a new hobby. My hobby is new hobbies, and I just like to do, I just like to pick up stuff. Some of it hits, some of it doesn't. I've been trying to learn Russian for a couple of years, and it's just not quite sticking. And I can't quite get it down. I don't really give it a lot of priority, to be honest. But a couple of years ago, as I said in the AI video, like I just thought programming might be kind of cool. So I tried that for like a year, and it was fun, and I learned some new things. And when I started YouTube originally, it was partly my wife encouraged me to. She was like, I think that you've got, I like your opinions. And I thought, well, you're married to me, you have to say that. But I also like, I really, I thought video editing would be fun. And I don't know, I just kind of thought making videos sounds interesting. So I downloaded Premiere and just figured, what the heck, I'll give this a shot. And at first, it was going to be more like social, political commentary.
Okay.
And one of my first videos was it was like about Marvel and how like don't bother watching the new Marvel stuff because it's a waste of your time. And the video was supposed to be like time management, and I was using that as an example of like how if you don't even like it, don't waste your time on it. And my wife was like, you should see these videos because your other stuff, you don't have the same energy. When you talk about movies and shows, you're obviously more passionate and it comes across on camera. And that one did really well. And that's when I was like, you know what, maybe I'm going to switch over to entertainment commentary. And then I'll just try to sprinkle the little life advice stuff that I had in, the politics that I had in mind. I'll sprinkle that in, but I'll mainly talk about the entertainment. And so it just kind of snowballed from there. And I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. See, because I remember you saying that, like, oh, I was learning, computer, and I was like, I was wondering, I was like, so is that what you do for a living, or?
No, I have a blue collar hard hat job. I work in an industrial plant. That's my day job. But every now and then, I don't know, I get a weird bug about something, and I'm just like, I'm gonna learn something new, and it typically goes for like 9 to 18 months, and then I'm like, all right, that was fun. I learned
Well,
something, and now I'm gonna let it go, and that's kind of how it
yeah.
goes. But YouTube is sticking, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
make it more than 18 months on this one.
Well, yeah, because you're a little over a year now in, right?
Yeah, 14 months. I think my very first video was posted on June 8th of last year.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, and did you see like immediate success? I mean, and by success I mean like a few thousand views here or there,
No,
or
I mean it
was that
was
something that kind of built?
so it was January. I remember the date because it was January 13th, and I had one video. It was about that show, Velma. Did you watch that show on HBO?
You know, I did not, and I heard like bad things, and then I watched your video, and I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not gonna watch it.
No, it was atrocious. But that was the one that got me over. So like I would have a couple like videos, I mean, 20 views. Some of them I have delisted because they were more like political or more like self-help kind of stuff. And
Yeah,
you know how YouTube is, like they really want you to kind of stay
stay in
in
your
a
lane.
subject.
Yeah,
So I delisted those so that the channel wouldn't be confusing once it got more successful. But I was creeping up, it was 200 and then 300. I had a video that like one of them, I think I had like 3,000 views on, and I was like, this is incredible. I never dreamt of this. And then it would go back down, and I was getting, 100 or less than 100. And then that one video, that was just off the cuff. I watched that show the day it came out, and I was like, well, let me just see what this is about. And I watched it, and it was so stupid and horrible. I was like, I'm gonna go home and just talk about it. So I went home and filmed that, edited it that night, and posted it the next morning. And then it exploded. I have no idea why. I don't feel like I did anything that different on
yeah,
the editing or whatever, but it just took off, and that got me, I think, like 5,000 subscribers just on that one video. But then
nice.
it leveled off again, and like for the
Yep.
next 3 months, it was very tiny growth. And
Yeah,
then like in May, I got another. So I have seen a lot of people that describe their experience the same way. They say it's not so much like an uphill slope; it's like a real stair
yeah,
step. You know?
yeah, yeah. I had a peak there from November through January, where it was just like huge. Like I was just kind of stepping like 50, 50, and then it was like 400, and
Yeah,
then yeah, and then you kind of come back down and go back. Yeah, so and sometimes the algorithm just catches something, or if you can, with books, it's like if you can get some of my best books, I got over 1,000 views on like if you get a popular book like the next day, like I'll try to run through these books that are new releases as fast as I
yeah.
can, and then you'll get some good views and subs off of that. But like some
How do
of
you?
your some oh go ahead.
Well, I just got. How do you? When you do the book reviews, does it bother you that or do you ever feel like you have to chase trends, like whatever's big on BookTube or Book Talk or whatever? Do you feel like you have to read those so that you can review them just because they are popular? Like, is that a thing, or
Yeah.
am I making that
So
up?
okay, you so you are dead on for a lot of people. And I kind of wish, in some ways, I wish I would have done that earlier.
Hmm.
But like, yeah, you'll have people, and it's smart, you'll go after the Wheel of Time, go after Lord of the Rings, go, Malazan's a big one. There's like 5 or 6. If like you just start out with those and you hit those really hard, you're guaranteed to get some subscribers there. And
Yeah,
then yeah, you can kind of chase the new big releases. But like I started out and I'm just like, I'm just gonna read what I like to read,
yeah,
and and then as you go through a lot of the series, then it's like, okay, now I'm caught up on certain things, so I can kind of jump over. And the one thing I wish I would have done is read more Sanderson earlier,
hmm
so I could have been, because it is fun. It is really fun
it
to
is.
be on the train when a new book comes out. And I talked a little bit about it, where it's like, you can, there's an energy that like everyone is thousands and tens of thousands of people are reading the same book the same time you are. And,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, I just started Sanderson like 2 months ago. So like the last week of this month here, I'll finish Hero of Ages. So I'll finish the first Mistborn trilogy.
Oh, nice. That's a good trilogy. It is, oddly enough, a lot of people say it's their favorite. It's not my top Sanderson because it's a little more there's no like levity in that book. It's very dreary. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of like in some of his other, like his Stormlight archives, or he made another trilogy, the Mistborn trilogy, that's like it's like a Wild West or a Western type setting, and it's in the same world, but it's very far in the future. And he has this he's got a character in that series called Wayne, and then he's also got a character in the Stormlight series called Lopen. And the guy that narrates his books for him, Michael Kramer, he reads both of those guys in the same voice because they basically have the same personality. And it's this really great comic relief that I feel like the original Mistborn trilogy was kind of missing, and that's what keeps it out of the top for me, because sometimes you're reading that book and you're like, man, when does it stop? When does everybody stop fighting and dying and nobody gets a break and everybody's dirty and they're ashy, like literally ashy? It's just,
it's not quite grimdark, but it's adjacent, with how it's gloom dark. And it's very gloomy. But and I watched I think all your Sanderson videos, and I loved your video. I love the passion, like you were talking about earlier. It's like while your wife was like, you're more passionate about these type of videos, those are the type of videos you should do. I loved your passion in the Sanderson hit piece video.
That one bugged me.
Oh man, you were going hardcore, like, and that's kind of some of the stuff I have started doing, like, and I like that stuff too. And you can tell, like, videos come across so much better when you do have some passion about a certain thing. But that was, I read it and it just didn't even make sense to me. Like, what this person was, what were they trying to accomplish? Were they trying to be like, I'm the cool guy going after the nerdy guy? Like,
and that, you're absolutely right. Like, that's part of the weird, like, it's one thing, when you see an author like do a hit piece on a successful person, you're like, well, it usually it makes sense. It riles people up, hitting on the big guy, right? Everybody loves to make fun of whatever, Microsoft or Facebook or Elon Musk or whatever it is. Like, that's always cool to do. But you're absolutely right. Like, just because he's a successful author, he's still like a chubby, nerdy guy. And no matter how many books he sells, you're always going to seem like you're punching down when you go out, because he's jolly. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. He just is such a sweet guy.
Yeah. I mean, anytime I've watched his lectures on writing and stuff. Yeah. And he's like, he seems like just the happy, nerdy guy that loves to do this, and the whole thing
he's
about
living his dream.
He's basically the like my favorite author is Jim Butcher. And if you ever see Jim Butcher at like events and stuff, he'll dye his hair weird colors and he walks around because he LARPs. He walks around with swords, and it's just like and he's always said, like, people have asked him, like, well, have you ever thought about going self-published? Because you're big enough now. You could, if Jim wanted to, he could do a Kickstarter and probably get millions of dollars. And Jim's like, I've thought about it, but it would take time away from my LARPing. And it's like, and I'm just like, that's it. That's the dream right there. Why would you attack somebody who's like, I'm just having fun out here? And the whole, he's your god, or whatever. He's he's extremely Mormon. Remember that?
So weird. You've got me convinced to check out the Dresden books from Butcher. Like, I think I know that I've heard that name before. The Dresden
there was
book.
a terrible sci-fi series like 15 years ago. I don't know, maybe if you heard it from the Sci-Fi Channel, but don't watch that. unless you want to do a video about how to not make an adaptation.
Well, Well, I'm making that next
Well,
week.
I was
We're
gonna
talking
say,
about Wheel of Time.
I guess you have made
Uh,
a few of those.
we'll be talking about Wheel of Time next week, and I'll be talking about that show the week after it premieres. But he does his stuff. It's humor, right? Like it's like a humor sci-fi kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very it's like the first few books is very like noir fantasy, urban fantasy. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
a wizard detective in Chicago. You know,
Mm.
but a lot of people can, because he'll say like his big influence was Buffy. Like so it has that Buffy, you know, feel to it, and it's never there are some really dark moments in there. But it's never so dark that you get kind of down on it, because there's always somebody that comes through and makes a joke and like, all right, like Dresden, let's pick yourself back up, you idiot, you know, and like let's, you know, so you know that I mean, and he has what, like 18 books in total
Yeah.
with side stories and stuff. So you know, Dresden's such a flush out character. By the time you get to the end, you feel like he's your friend. You know, you're like, I know everything about you. Like, you know,
I mean, just this when you say a wizard detective in Chicago doing detective noir, like that jumble of words right there has got me interested all by itself right there. Like I
yeah,
just need to read at least one book to find out
yeah,
what does that look like,
yeah.
because that sounds entertaining all by
Yeah.
itself.
Well, and the books are very small compared to like a Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the first book is like, I don't even know if it's 300 pages, and then they progressively get bigger, but they never get more than like 550 pages. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting. I'd say the first 4 or 5 books are like kind of Buffy, monster of the week type
Yeah.
stuff, and then it just, you know, the lore and everything opens up. Um, but yeah, that's one thing I did want to talk to you about is like Hollywood and like where do you think they're going wrong? I mean, like everyone has their own thoughts, but I really like your opinions. Like, where do you think they're going wrong when it comes to adapting these books and video games?
I think that, well, for video games, I want to make a video about that. I think I'll talk about it with the Tomb Raider, because Phoebe Waller-Bridge is apparently going to do a Tomb Raider show or movie for Amazon.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I I think with video games, one of the big things is that a lot of gameplay is like the action. You know, it's shooting
Yeah.
or casting spells or whatever it is, and so much of our experience of video games is that like actual input interaction.
Yeah, we're
uh
making the decision.
yeah, and there's really no way to get that across to screen. And also a lot of games they're very big, they're very sprawling, or the other way where like the action is all there really is,
Yeah.
and once you take that away and the actual player interaction with it, there you find that there's really not a ton of story to actually tell. I think they found that out with Uncharted, the Uncharted movie. Partly, I think that
Ye-
was just bad casting, but also so much of that game is you either shooting bad guys or you're solving puzzles.
Yeah.
But really, it's just you're following one clue to the next, and there isn't a ton of story. Certainly not enough that I don't think enough to fill out an entire movie. So I think that's part of their problem. But as far as the book adaptations, I think a big issue is ego. Like the Wheel of Time books. For have you read the Wheel of Time books?
I have not. I have, you know, I've watched the first, and I've talked to some friends who have read or at least read into them.
Mm-hmm.
And watching the show, I felt like especially the first few episodes, I'm like, this is the most generic fantasy thing I've ever seen. And
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe it's just because I've read a lot of fantasy now or watched a lot of fantasy books. Like, I was like, is that pretty accurate? And they're like, well, it's kind of, you know, but you know, so you know, I at least want to give the first one, The Eye of the World, a go.
Yeah, I like that book. I understand when people tell me like it's a 13 book with a bonus book. They're like, I can't get into that. And you know what? I can't hold that against anybody. It's a lot. That's a big investment. It's the same thing like when I tell people about Sanderson and they're like, the audiobook is 50 hours long,
50
5
hours.
0. I'm like, yeah, it is. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, I can't. I'm like, you know what? I can respect that. I understand that. But I think the big thing with the show, Wheel of Time, was that it's fan fiction. I mean, there's really, I can't put it any nicer. There is no other way to put it. The showrunner, Rafe Judkins, he made up a bunch of stuff that he thought would be a good idea. And I think that happens a lot with these adaptations is you see these people that either really didn't even read the source material or don't respect it. And they're like, it was a good starting point, but I have some better ideas. And it's like, maybe you do, which I'm doubtful of. I think that your fan fiction wasn't good enough to make it on its own. That's why you want to tack somebody else's name on. But I also think that when people show up to the show or the theater or whatever, and you have a famous name attached to your product, they're expecting to see that. They don't care what your story was. I think we're going to find that with this new Disney, this Snow White that they're making. And the lead actress is like, we are doing everything different. And it's like, well, then why are you calling it Snow White? Because people are going to show up, they're going to want to see Snow White. And then they're going to find whatever it is that you made. And they're going to be angry. And like, they're justifiably going to be angry because you told a different story, but you just use that name. And it's ego. I mean, like, I think she's a very extreme example, but a very apt example that her ego is, I don't know how she fits through doorways with a head that big because she thinks she's the smartest person on the planet and so clever. And I think that is why they fail more often than not, is because of this the ego.
You know, Disney has had a lot of problems. I mean, as you pointed out, they lost, you know, what, almost $1.5 billion or something like that over the last year and a half.
Yeah, it's they're bad right now.
I mean, every movie except for Guardians, I think, has lost them money. You know, over the past year.
Yeah,
and it's
everyone. Well, I think Wakanda Forever made them some money. That's right. Last December, Wakanda was all right, and Guardians. Everything else across the spectrum for them.
Yeah, and to me, it's like when she came out and she was doing that interview. First, before I ever knew who she was, we seen the photos from the shoot, and all I seen was the photo. I hadn't watched your video or anyone's video on it, and I, like many others, thought, "Well, that's a prank." Oh, good job, guys, good memes, you know. And then they come out and they're like, "No, it's real." I'm like, you. And then she starts speaking. She starts speaking, and you're like, has anybody ever tried to tank their own movie worse than she's like? I mean, the Little Mermaid was a big thing, right? And if you just looked at the box office numbers, you'd be like, it's okay, but not on what they spent.
No.
And I'm like, you guys think that's bad? Nobody is going to go see this movie. This is going to be the biggest flop. If they spend $200 million on this Snow White, it's going to be the worst flop in their history.
Yeah. And then, you know, whatever it is, they market it, and it'll be interesting to see if they market it like extra hard, because now they have to sort of overcome her comments and all this controversy, or if they will like yank the marketing budget, which will doom the movie, but it's kind of doomed, it seems, already. And maybe somebody's gonna be like, you know what, let's not waste any more.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, the last interview she did, because it was like right at the beginning of the writer's strike. Now she can't really talk. She's not allowed to talk or whatever right now about it. But like right as it started, she was saying, you know, she was like, oh yeah, the prince might not even be in the movie. You know, he might get cut out of the movie. And then we're looking at the dwarves, and they're not actually going to be dwarves. And I'm like, and I did a short about this, and it did fairly well. And it's like, it's like, why are you making Snow White? Right. Why are you calling it Snow White if you don't want to make Snow White? You know, I'm just like, make your own movie. You like make a whole new movie that's similar to Snow White, if that's what you want to do.
And the angry cynic in me says they know, somewhere in their subconscious knows, that whatever their idea isn't good enough to stand on its own legs. And so they have to co-opt, you know, the name of something famous, but then change everything about it. And I don't know. I'm also like, she obviously said the stuff about there's no prince, and then she was like, basically Snow White is not. We're totally getting rid of the idea of her falling in love, chasing after love. Like, it's like, is that you're telling? This is the company of Disney telling little girls like true love is stupid. You don't need
Yeah.
that. You need to like. What company is this?
Yeah. And this is I talked about this the other day. I was like, Disney used to be an automatic box office slam dunk no matter what they did. I mean, I don't know. I assume maybe that we're about the same age. I'm 35,
38. Yep.
Okay. So you remember in the early 90s, it was like coming out of the vault for a limited time, and they would remaster whatever movie and put it in the VHS box, and everybody bought it.
You had to, because it was going back in the vault for
it
10
was
years.
Back in the vault, and it's like they couldn't lose. So I don't know if their thought is they're still like, if they're like, we can't lose. And that's the way I felt about Marvel over the last 4 years. Like they did so well. Like they had almost no downside for like 10 years. And then they were just like, well, we got you all hooked. We're going to make you watch whatever we want. Like we'd random stuff. But we're going to tell you what should be good. You know?
Yeah. And maybe that would have kept working, but I don't know. Something about COVID, I think, changed a lot of that. People seem to be choosy with their dollars. Obviously, inflation is hurt. Like I think the economic side of it is playing. It's playing a big role. And you're going to spend $40-50 to go to the movies or more. And if you have a company that has a track record of making very average movies, you're not going to shell that money out to go see something that is going to be very okay, and you're just going to see online in 3 months anyway.
Yeah, and so I did kind of want to ask you about, like, because you've done some Marvel stuff, and what, like, obviously kind of like my opinion, with I feel like they're kind of rested on their laurels, and then somebody got in there and said, we're gonna start doing like we're gonna put our own views on it. What do you think has happened with Marvel specifically, and do you think that they can work their way out of it?
So a lot of people, I need to look into this, but a lot of people bring up this ESG score thing. And I have a vague idea, like it's obviously an investing thing. These larger companies have this goal to make, whatever, some kind of social goals they have, and they provide a score to companies. And then the better your score is, the more investment you get. So it's a stock price situation and investing dollar situation. Yeah. That's about as much. I mean, I guess that's really all I know about it. I don't really know a ton of the details. So I think that may be some of it. But then I think that as like with Disney, like we're seeing a lot, like they were trying to push Phoebe Waller-Bridge in Indiana Jones. They did the Daisy Ridley thing in Star Wars. They're obviously replacing a lot of the old Avengers with women in the MCU. I think that, like you said, they kind of feel like they have part of the audience on lock. Like, you guys are going to come see these movies no matter what we do. You might complain, but you're going to come see them. And they figure if we replace the heroes and we get the women, then we'll have women come see our stuff too. And that, like, basically we'll just have an ever increasing audience size, and that means more money. I kind of get the impression that it's a little bit of the investing ESG score, but I think it's also partly just this really terrible math equation that they made up, where they can just go, we'll swap this character for this one with these, this is in their pants, and then look at that, more women audience now. And it's not working, but I think that's what their thought process was.
Yeah, I mean, and because, like, there was a floor. I felt like for that first like 10, 11 years or so, they had a floor where, like, you were guaranteed no matter what kind of movie they made, because they made some average movies. Yeah. Not all of them were great movies, but they all had that like $170 million floor, domestically, where it's like, we have that built in, and then whether we make a better movie or not, that will dictate how much higher we go above that. But I feel like you said, they got rid of, Steve, they got rid of Tony Stark, Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. and all these beloved people, but they didn't do what you would think they would do. What a story would dictate is you bring in good new characters. They were just like, all right, we're gonna make Falcon Captain America. We're gonna make Lady Thor. We're gonna do, and people are like, we don't want you replacing, trying to create new characters that are already existing. Make a brand new character that we can like, because only the hardcore of hardcore comic fans knew anybody in the Guardians, right? Those were basically all new characters to everybody, and they made it, James Gunn made it good enough to where we all love them.
Yeah, absolutely. He did a great job with that trilogy.
And so I think that started it, and that's why their floor is like getting lower and lower, with how many people will just go, well, it's a Marvel movie, I got to go see. And I've started bailing on some of these, even some of these, like I still haven't seen Shang-Chi, and I've heard that one was kind of decent, but I've just, unless it's like, my wife's like, oh, let's go to Thor 4, Love and Thunder, and it's like, all right, because that's her favorite character, and I'm just like, man, Gore was the only good part in that movie. Like, the problem with that movie is like they couldn't decide what they wanted the movie to be. Like, you had dark, gritty sections, and those were really good. But then, like, you'd have a fart joke next, and you're like, I'm like, what are you thinking?
I also think that, I want to believe that they were, like, in phase 4, they were trying. It was kind of a combination of things. Like, it was clear that they were just trying some new things. Like, phase 4 was kind of variety hour for them. Like, Doctor Strange 2 was a little more of a horror type movie.
A little bit.
They tried Thor 4, which was just a straight up comedy, except, like you said, where the Gore was there, and he was actually dark, but then they jumped right back into slapstick. She-Hulk, they thought they were going to do like a fourth wall breaking, Ryan Reynolds style goofy comedy. They had the Eternals. They thought, all right, let's go a different direction. They're like, it feels like they were just trying so many different things, and obviously a lot of it didn't land. And I don't think that it would have been so bad if, first of all, it wasn't like the entire phase. Like with Guardians of the Galaxy, that was a risk, but it was only one risk in a sea of guaranteed
hits.
Household names, and then it worked. But then phase 4, they were like, we're trying all new things with very few. Like they flip-flopped. There was Spider-Man, which was guaranteed. Doctor Strange was guaranteed. And they did a whole lot more experimenting and testing. And I also think they underestimated how many people were, like you said, they made some mediocre movies in the first 3 phases, but they were very clear as to where everything was heading. There's this Infinity Saga. These stones are all going to come together at some point. Oh, we keep popping this Thanos guy. He pops up every now and then in a movie. And everybody knew this is all going to culminate in this big event. And then when it was over, I don't believe that the people at Marvel realized just how many folks were like, okay, see you later. I'm done. That was great. Great ride. I'm out, and they thought they'll just keep coming back. And so many people, especially in my comments, people are like, after Endgame, I was just done. And the more bad stuff they make, the more it solidifies my decision. Like, it lets me know I made a good decision. But a lot of people were they were prepared to be done after Endgame because they wanted off the ride. They didn't want to have to see 2 movies a year. Didn't want to have to keep up with this long story. I think they should have reset after that. That would have been a good idea.
Well, and what I was telling people is, instead of going, they did like what somebody who doesn't know about, the ups and downs of stories, right? They did what we just had this guy try to kill half the universe, so we got to go bigger, right? That's what we have to do. Where can we go? It's like multiverse,
right?
And that's in the comics. So, like, sure, but what they should have done is they should have came back down to a world event. like they should have done Apocalypse then. I know, like they could have just swept the old Apocalypse under the rug from Fox and be like, okay, here's a world level threat.
Yes.
Instead of, because like you said, it's kind of fatigue. It's like, the universe was on fire with Thanos, and then it's like now all the universes are like,
Right.
what's the I don't know what the exact name for it is, but the thing about where it's like if you have 10 people that are going to die that are in your county, you feel real bad about it. But then it's like if it's 10,000 people across the world, you don't really care about it because you just can't conceive it and
Exactly.
stuff. And that's kind of the same thing. It's like you're pushing it too much. And do you think that they can reel this back in? And if you were in charge, how would you do it?
If I'm working on a video, I need to delve into, like, I don't read a lot of comics, and I don't want to sound dumb in a video where I talk about like storylines they should do. So I'm doing research on it, but I think they need to find a way to say very clearly this universe and these multiverses, they're done. And then we're going to wait 12 months, maybe. I think that was another problem. Like after Endgame, they're like, all right, we have more. We have so many more. And like people were like, I just need a breath. Like, like you said, it was a universe. Half the universe died. Then we got him back. It was this whole gigantic thing. You can't just throw me into the next adventure. You need to give me a second, the audience. But I think they need to come up with a way to signal to the audience and obviously do a lot of advertising and say, we're ending it here. It's going to be a big event. Maybe they'll use Kang. We're going to do a big thing, big fight, maybe a 2-part movie. And at the end of it, we're going to resolve this universe and we're going to start over with all new characters, hopefully the X-Men. I know a lot of people want to see the X-Men, and I think they should start over where in a new cinematic universe, nobody's heard of the Avengers, nobody's, no backstory to keep up with, no continuity errors. I know, like with the Eternals, at the end of the Eternals, there's this giant celestial being sticking out of the earth, but then the Eternals bombed, and nobody's ever no Marvel property has talked about it since. They just act like it didn't happen.
Giant head sticking out of the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. But the audience doesn't forget that, even if they just don't want to talk about it. And I think they need to find a way to just clinch it and say, okay, we're done with that story. And then now we're going to tell an all new story. And like you said, we're going to start small. We're going to tell an all new story. It's going to be X-Men, and just the X-Men mansion is in danger. Just whatever. Just one state in the United States is in danger. Maybe just half the world, something. Because if you remember, that's how Captain America started. It was quite literally just fighting against Red Skull and him trying to break his buddies out of Nazi war camp. It wasn't even a worldwide anything. It wasn't even winning the war. It was just Captain America finding himself and getting his buddies out of danger and stopping Red Skull from whatever. Well, I guess he did stop the war because Red Skull was going to create some weapon, but it was pretty small scale compared to what they've now gotten into. And I think they need to go back to that.
Well, and even Iron Man, Iron Man was just, him getting captured, him, figuring out a way to make the original suit to get out of the cave. And then he fights a couple bad guys, shoots a tank here or there, and then fights his uncle, well, not his uncle, but like the guy that kind of helped raise him or whatever, the evil guy. And it was just them two at the warehouse. It wasn't like, we're going to war with the whole country and all, and all this. But yeah, I definitely think that's in line. And I think they're really trying to hold leaks out of Deadpool 3, because I've heard like Deadpool 3 is trying to do the reset, basically. Like he's using the little time watch to go and like kill. Apparently, I've heard it might be like there was an old comic book called Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe or whatever. But they think that he might be killing the Fox universe off. Like that's all he's doing is just going through and killing all the Fox characters.
That would be hilarious.
So that they can just like start over again. That those X-Men are gone. We'll find a new universe with new X-Men or something. But that one thing that a lot of people were mad about, and I don't understand how, because the writers on WandaVision, they just kind of, I don't, did you watch all of WandaVision?
Yes.
All right. So when they pulled in Quicksilver, who was Quicksilver in the Fox universe, right?
Yes.
Jason Peters or Evan Peters, they brought him in and he's like, I'm Quicksilver. And we're all like, what?
That was a
Are
really
you
cool
kidding
moment.
me? He's like the best character of the new X-Men.
Yes.
And then like they come in like, just kidding. You know, like you had no idea that was gonna piss off like half your fan base. Like I mean, that some of these decisions that they make just boggles my mind.
Well, and then it almost feels like that whole show was a waste too. My daughter was furious at Doctor Strange 2 because she loved Wanda. She watched that show, watched WandaVision multiple times. I didn't catch it at first because I was just busy or whatever. And she was like, Dad, you need to watch. Like, she was adamant, we got to watch this show. It's so good, right? And then she watches Doctor Strange 2. We rented it, thankfully, because I think she'd have been yelling at the screen in the theater. And we would have got escorted out because that was her favorite character. And the show, you know, has all of this buildup and all of this backstory. And then in Doctor Strange, they're like, oh, she's a crazy person. And she's dead. Well, maybe she's dead. Who knows? Maybe. They left that open-ended, kind of.
Yeah, she ain't dead.
Yeah. Oh, they're gonna bring it back.
But how, like, I know you're big into video games. I assume The Witcher 3 was in your repertoire?
Oh, I loved it. It was outstanding. Right?
So did you ever read the books or anything before that?
I didn't. That's been on my TBR for ever, and I've never got. And what's silly is they're shorter books too, so I don't even have a good excuse as to why.
Only the last one is. Yeah, only Lady of the Lake is a long book. The rest of them are pretty short. But yeah, my friend had been hounding me to read these books forever, and then my wife just randomly found The Witcher 3 on discount. She's like, "I got this game for you. They said it was pretty good. I got it for like $8." And I was like, yeah, I hear this is a really good game, right? But and my friend's like, it's basically a sequel. It's basically a spiritual sequel. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go through all the books before I play the game. And it made the game so much more enjoyable because you're like, all right, this, I see what they're doing here. And The Witcher 3 to me is like top 5 games ever made. I mean, I just, but then going, and then we got pumped, right? Henry Cavill wanted The Witcher. Like, he's like, I'm The Witcher. Like, I've read all the books multiple times. I played the games. I built a computer to play the game, So, and then you're like, oh, here we go. This is, Superman is, this is, and then you're watching it, and like, a lot of times I am not as harsh on first seasons as some other people, because I'm like, okay, they'll take into as long as you can feel like, okay, we got a good Geralt, a good Yasker, aka Dandelion. Those two characters really get, and Yennefer, I don't think she was the right choice, but she kind of grew into it a little bit. And I was like, okay, they have some base there, and then they can hear our complaints and come back in the next season. And, but then after season 2, I'm like, and then Henry's like, I'm out. Like, he's like, you guys are not sticking to the story. And I'm like, and that made me more mad than probably any of this type of stuff has, because The Witcher is set up to be, it could have been better than Game of Thrones, because you get to focus in on one character and then Ciri later on. Right. But they didn't even follow it. Like, Ciri, when she first comes in, is like 6 years old when he first meets her. And they just wanted to speed it up so they could have more female representation right from the get-go. Yeah. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not that story. That's not how The Witcher starts. She becomes a bigger part later in the books, And like you were saying, like, I feel like this was a big thing where the Hollywood writers think that they're better than the people who wrote the source material.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're not. You would be the one having a mansion in Poland and, and all this if that was you. Your job is to make it palatable for TV. That's it.
And I feel like even if you are, let's just pretend we're in Fantasyland and you are better than that guy whose name I can't pronounce, and I'm not going to try to. You know what? It doesn't matter because he wrote that book. So even if your ideas are better, go make them better somewhere else. Because when I see The Witcher, I'm expecting Witcher stuff. I'm not expecting the Witcher label with whatever it is you thought was cool. It's. I hate to use strong, be over dramatic, but it's like a betrayal to the audience where you thought you were getting one thing and you got a bait and switch. And then it also bothers me, the ego continues because then they're like, oh, you guys, the audience, you can't ever be made happy. And they blame the audience. And it's like, you're the one that you lied to me when you said this was Witcher and it wasn't. And I don't know what else to say.
I'm telling you that you're changing the book, and I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask you what you thought about. I had a thought. I'll come back to it. What were you gonna say?
Well, I know that you watch, or you seem to watch a lot of stuff that people already are telling everybody is going to be terrible. Kind of the whole like, I watched it so you don't have to. Because I've seen you some of your reviews are like, yeah, this was horrible, but I watched it. Yeah. Did you watch Blood Origins, The Witcher Blood Origins?
I watched the one episode of it, and some stuff, like I watched one episode of that. I watched one episode of Rings of Power. And sometimes I don't have time to make a video of it, or sometimes I make too much negative stuff and I don't want to be the channel that's just like, it all sucks. It's all terrible. Everything's garbage, whatever. Sometimes I'll pass on something just so that I don't have to make another video where I'm just like, yup, it was crap again. Let's be angry and yell into the camera. Like sometimes I like to find stuff that's good, or I find old things that I like and I'll talk about those, to try to space that out so that the channel doesn't devolve into me just being pissed off about everything, and just being that guy, like, okay, white guy's mad at Disney. Like there's a lot of those, So I watched the first episode and I would have watched more if I was going to review it and crap on it, but I just didn't even want to. It was it was so bland. It did a lot of the things that I'm going to rag on Wheel of Time for. One big thing that I'm going to talk about with that show that the Blood Origins did is, in a lot of high fantasy, the cultures are very separated. And partly that's for your convenience as a reader, because you can tell where you're at based on the description of the people. And it also gives you a very clear mental image of like these very different places.
Empires,
so they segregate. And then also in a lot of older fantasy, a lot of the world is predicated on people being very tribal, kingdoms that don't intermix except for like a little bit of trade. So only traders are really the ones that are kind of crossing boundaries. And most of the population is very homogenous. They all look the same, and they're stark contrast again to create that kind of difference where, like, in this kingdom, these are the white redheaded people, and then in that kingdom, those are the sub-Saharan, very dark African looking people, and then that kingdom over there has all of the Asian, they've got all the Asian stereotypes, and they're wearing the conical hats, and they eat rice, and so that you, the reader, are like, cool, I know where each of these, and I can kind of make a mental image. And then with like with Blood Origin and so many shows, they're so obsessed with the racial diversity that they remove that. So then in the show, you don't know where the characters, they could be anywhere because they didn't separate those areas to make them distinct and unique. And then everything just ends up looking the same. Everything looks like a scene out of Braveheart. It's all kind of medieval England looking cottages and stuff. And it's boring and bland, and everything is very muted colors. And that's one thing that stuck out to me with the Blood Origin was everywhere looks the same. They said there was like 3 kingdoms or something. Could have fooled me. Could have been one place. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and that was one thing that I noticed with the Wheel of Time. And you'll have some people who will be like, they'll be like, well, it's fantasy. Come on, you can do whatever you want in fantasy. I'm like, but you have to get us to suspend disbelief as well, because in the Wheel of Time, they go to like this village. You see it like early. I don't know if it's the first episode, second episode, but like you go to a village that's down in this valley that's away from all the major stuff, and yet like there's one of every type of people in there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I expect this, but that's okay. But then you see like one of our characters is, I don't know if he's Asian, and then his mother is African American and his dad is white. And it's like, you guys aren't even making biological sense here. I get it, like if you want to, but you got to make some things make sense in certain ways, right? You know, or it just looks goofy.
So Wheel of Time was especially bad because, you know, a lot of high fantasy will do the racial segregation stuff to give you the imagery portion. But in certain parts of the Wheel of Time, it was actually integral to the story because, you know, Rand is, he's one of the Aiel people. They live across the other side of the mountains. They're very reclusive. They're super murderous. Like they're very crazy good warriors and whatever. And we find out that he is actually one of them. He was found as a baby. And so part of the story is that he looks different from everybody in his village. He's taller than them. He has red hair. None of them, they're all brown-headed. They're backwoods country people. When the boys brag about, like, they're like, oh, we've been to the next town over because we're very well traveled. Like, these are people that do not go more than one town away. And
very realistic for medieval times.
Yeah. And so the point was that Rand stuck out like a sore thumb. And anybody that came into town, a couple of people come into town and they peg him right away. Like, wow, you look different. You don't look like you're from around here. And none of that came through in the show. And then because he is part of this race of people, this Aiel, and everybody knows they are fierce warriors. They're deadly. There have been wars with them in the past. So as he goes about his adventure, people see him and they're instantly like nervous about him, or some people are openly hostile. And he's like, why does everybody hate me? Like, you look like these people that killed a whole lot of people a while ago. But you know, since they mixed everything up, and like you said, even in a family unit, everything was all mixed up. None of that came through in any way. And that was like a story point. And the casting glossed right over it.
Yeah. Well, that was a big thing for The Witcher. And my friend, like, that's the one thing that turned him off to the show, is because the sorceress who is with the Nilfgaardians is black. The Nilfgaardians in the books are racist. They are the most racist people you could ever imagine. They are the scourge of just kill everybody who's not us, subjugate everybody that's not us. But then somehow they're accepting this sorceress who's black. You know? And you're just like, that's not the way they would kill her. They would like enslave her, you know.
It doesn't even fit into the story. And like I said, the thing is, with a lot of these fantasy things, it gives you the chance to just pick one of the races and go, you know what? If you're interested, like you're like, we need to get representation, we want to hire black actors. I think that's great. Pick one of the races. Like in the Wheel of Time, people generally agree that the sea folk they're all black. So cast anybody that's going to be on screen that's one of of that tribe or those people. Make sure you cast all of them as black people or Latino or Asian or whatever it is you want to do, but decide ahead of time which groups are going to be which. And even in The Witcher, they could have done that. Like, I don't remember the name of the kingdoms, but they could have decided, okay, we're in our version, everybody in this kingdom, not the island that they go to, but everybody that is in this area, this whole nation is black. And that would, if you kept it consistent, it would make sense.
Yeah,
and
like
then
you could have done the Dryads or something for, you know, the Brooklyn Forest, like the half elves, like, yeah, that would have made perfect sense. I'm like, okay, yeah. You know?
Yeah. I think it's very important in fantasy it's such a consistent theme. And then when they bring it to the screen, they're like, we got to have the most diverse casting. And it's like, it doesn't, in these stories, it does not make sense. And if you want to do representation, that's great, but you just need to keep consistent representation in each particular people group. This can't look like a college campus pamphlet. This doesn't work, you know?
Not in 1500, it wasn't that way.
No.
And that's the thing, like, we kind of talk about, like, well, there are great, characters from all around the world. There are great mythologies that people just don't touch, and, some people will be like, well, they'll make, some kind of Roman thing, black, or they're trying to make black Vikings or something like that. I'm like, no.
Black Cleopatra, they tried to do.
You have great African mythologies. And like in my book series, it's basically, I was heavily influenced by The Witcher and by the Dresden Files. Like every mythology exists in my world. Like my world is one timeline, one world, but every mythology exists in there. And, I try not to bombard too much, but like you'll see African creatures, African gods that just kind of, show up for whatever reason to do certain things or whatnot. But I'm like, go get them. They're out. If you're a traditionally published author or you're a Hollywood pusher, that's your job. That's all you have to do. Like, you don't have to go to work for 10 hours a day like I do, and I think diversity is good, but it's diversity with, that makes sense there's a reason for it, There's a lot of diversity in my stuff, but that's because, I focus on, gods, Polynesian gods and, Slavic gods and stuff like that. It's like, go get them. You don't have to take out somebody else's, mythology and plug in your own identity into that. Go find your, your people and bring them to the screen or to the books.
Yeah. Well, and what's amazing to me is that it feels like such a slam dunk because the market is very saturated with European folk tales. There's a lot of tales about mermaids. There's a lot of tales about Vikings, tons of medieval English stuff. There's even a lot of stuff there's a lot of like Chinese and Japanese things. Very few stories from India, very few stories from the Middle East, very few stories from Africa, especially. Very few stories from South America. Like we do some Central America stuff. We've seen a lot more of that coming in, but very few things from South America. And it surprises me. I would think that any author or movie studio or whatever that did one of those stories, just the novelty of it alone would draw a crowd for them to go, this is an African folktale. You've never heard this. I think a fair amount of people would be like, hell, I'm game, because it's something different that I've never heard before. Or they could even get religious. They could tell stories from the Hindu religion. Just read the Bhagavad Gita, I think is the name of it. That like the imagery in that book is crazy, and you could make a crazy cool story out of just the imagery from that book. Just retell the war that happens. That the main character, I can't think of the god's name, Krishna, that Krishna describes, and there's this war that happens in the Gita. Just retell that story. You don't even have to try to make it a religious thing and convince people to join that religion. Like, just tell that story with all of the supernatural elements, and people would come see it because it would be so freaking cool looking.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. Like, I focus a lot on Native American mythologies and stuff like that, which you don't see. And my last book was my second book wasn't a direct sequel to More Than a Vampire. It was kind of its own standalone, but it focused on like the Wild West. It was a Western fantasy with like tall tales put into a more realistic setting, Yeah. So, you got Pecos Bill and Paul Bunyan and John Henry, and, all they kind of mix and mash through there, because
that's cool.
I was like, I haven't heard of any fantasy author using American tall tales in their books,
Right.
And and that's the big thing I say is like there are like you want an African American hero. I mean, you have John Henry, make him cool,
Yeah.
there are other like African American like gods that have kind of popped up that as I do research, I'm like, why haven't they tried to do anything with this character or that
Some of them
character?
are so cool.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of Caribbean gods and creatures that are like freaking awesome. And I'm like, why has nobody tried to do this yet?
I have no idea. And I think that any authors that are getting ahead of that, I think are going to already kind of have an advantage because I mean, I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball, but at a certain point, the stories about the Fae and dragons we're going to run out. We're going to run out of stories about Fae people, the freaking Crown of Thorns or whatever that book was. This Fourth Wing novel, like we're running out of dragon fantasy. Even if the dragons are having sex, we're running out of Fae stories, even if they're all having sex. We're gonna peter out of those genres. Dark academia, we ran out of those stories. So I think that it might be kind of getting ahead of the curve to start researching some of those other lore. Like you said, the stuff is just, even from a pure imagery standpoint, it's just cool.
Yeah, well, and you have like a lot of ups and downs when it comes to fantasy, because I remember like when I was writing More Than a Vampire, like as I was writing it, people were like, "Oh, vampires are dead, man. Like it's over." And by the time I finished it, like vampires are back. It's like, but I think vampires, but I think vampires are a special breed of like book and story and movie, because like I think they're always gonna be around. Like there's and this guy, his name is Philip Chase. He's a professor, but he also has a booktube channel, and he talks a lot about this, how there's this special connection that we have to the vampire character, because it's it is like death and sex and all these things that we kind of fear and we love and fear at the same time. They kind of have that mismatch. But I will say that there are it is kind of, there's a love story, heavy love story in it, but I have mostly positive reviews, but some people, like even some of my beta readers, are like, well, the best parts are when Simon's off on his own. It's like, because and I think you even said that kind of, I don't know if you were talking about a Sanderson book or not, but you were talking about adult content in books and stuff, and you're just like, you don't have to do that. In fact, it's better a lot of times when you're not doing that. And that's one thing. I kind of already had my sequel planned out, but like in the sequel, it's like, it's pretty much all the best parts that people liked is kind of just more of that,
Yeah.
But
I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to agree with you. I think that, especially in the fantasy genres, we're getting this fantasy romance that is getting big, and some of it, or I mean, it's borderline or just 100. It's really just smut at this point. Like a lot of these books are just, it's like, look, if you just want to go watch adult movies, then just go watch them. Like, don't pretend that's not what you're here for, because that's what this book is about. Like, it's just smut. That's all it is. It's not even a story anymore with some of these. And I think we're bleeding too far into that. And I think sometimes, I mean, just for me, I've never seen it done well. I've never seen it done where I'm not reading it and I'm like, oh, this just feels, I feel embarrassed reading this right now. This is a little,
well, and it's crazy. Like as I got into the publishing sphere and, started doing research about how to publish and all this, you find out that like, the best, and somehow most of them are able to keep their names so low key, but like the best selling genre is the romance genre. I mean, there are like super rich people that you've never heard of because all they do is romance novels, and it's just like, this is what the women are picking up. Like this is what women are reading all the time.
Danielle Steele's not a household name for no reason.
like Nora Roberts, but she's not super smutty as far as I don't know. I haven't really read any of her stuff, but she seems to be, super mainstream and stuff like that. But I know you were talking about your experience with Audible and Spotify. That has been that's been a big thing recently. Is Spotify's trying to go after Amazon, and still there was a company in Ohio where I live called Findaway Voices, and I think Spotify bought them for like $100 million or something like that because they want to try and compete. But what has been your experience with the other forms of audiobooks?
Well, I'll tell you, and then I'm super interested to find, because you're an author, and I am so curious to hear your side of this as someone who's actually done it in an industry. But as a consumer, I try, Sanderson's play worked. I bought his Kickstarter, and then he was like, "Hey, but it's not on Audible," and I was like, "Well, you were going to get my money anyway, man. So whatever. I'll try Spotify. I'll try Speechify." My experience with Spotify is I like their music service, and it actually, I did sign up. I don't like ads. I have YouTube Premium. Like if I believe in a service, I'll pay for the no ads because I hate them. But I tried Spotify Premium. I liked the music service. Their audiobooks feels like they were like, well, we have an app. Just put a tab for books, I guess. I don't know. Maybe people buy, and you can't buy them through the app because everybody's trying to circumvent Google Play now or Apple Store. So you have to find a desktop and go buy them, whereas with Audible, right there in the app, you've got your credits. Boom. Yeah. I want this book. I've got it right now.
So how do you buy stuff? How do you buy audiobooks in Spotify?
You have to go to like Spotify.com on a desktop browser.
Wow.
You can't do it through the Spotify app. You have to do it through a browser. So their listening controls were good. Like the app functions really well. Shopping for the books is not great. Their storefront is not great. And also you cannot share the books. Whereas with Audible, we share the books all throughout my house. And my everybody's phone, or like they give you a certain number of devices, but it's like, it's generous number of devices. Whereas Spotify, you don't. So we found that at the hard way where we got the first book, Tress, as Sanderson's 4 books that he wrote. And I put it on my Spotify just because I got the email and figured out how it worked and whatever. And we had Spotify Family Premium. So, we paid one price for multiple phones. And then I found out we couldn't share the book. So that was very frustrating.
Jeez.
So then the next 2 books my wife put on her Spotify account, and I tried Speechify. And that's a cool concept where it will it'll basically it's like a plug-in app that you can run other apps underneath, and it will read the screen for you.
It's like an AI voice that reads it.
Yeah, exactly. They have, and you can go premium with them too, and they'll get you access to more voices, but it will read, things to you, and you can speed it up so you can read stuff faster, and you get more retention. And I find I do my Bible reading that way. Like I have the YouVersion Bible app, and I have it play while I'm reading it.
Yeah,
and I find that I can go faster and I retain it better that way. So it's a very good idea what they have. I just found their app to be almost unusable. Like it was just it was missing intuitive features. It was slow. It was clunky. Their app needs so much work. And I just feel like Audible, like I know that you guys are getting screwed by Audible, and I understand that. I know that your cut is disgusting. The problem is that Audible they've almost made it hard to use anything else because they've made their service so convenient and cheap. I remember I used to buy audiobooks on CD back before these services existed, and they were like $50.
Oh man. Well, even if you look, if you don't buy, like if you don't do like buy 3 credit deals or whatever, if you just want to buy a Sanderson audiobook, some of them are like $50. Yeah. If you just want to spend your own money and not do the credit deals or whatever, or not be a member, it's like, that's how much they used to be. Like if you wanted that, that's what it cost. And my, because both of my books that I have out, I have audiobooks, and I had audiobooks made, and when my third book drops in October, I hope to release them at the same time. That'll be the first time I've done that. But yeah, like most people, it's a love-hate relationship with Amazon and Audible, because I have noticed sales go up in my book sales, my physical book sales, and my ebook sales when I've done the audiobook. So it all kind of, they feed off of each other, because it gives you more, visibility as the audiobook starts selling. And I'm assuming the Amazon's algorithms like, oh, well, maybe people will want to take the paperback too, and they start kind of pushing it. So you're kind of thankful. You're like, oh, well, thank you for giving us this platform. But what doesn't make any sense to me is their revenue sharing is backwards from the paperbacks. If you go exclusive with Amazon for your physical books and everything, it's 60-40. You get the big chunk, right?
Yeah.
But on Audible, it's flipped. It's 60-40 them, and it could be even worse for you if you do a revenue split with your narrator, which is becoming less and less of a thing, because people are like, well, now I only get 20%,
Yeah.
And audiobooks, and the thing about it is, like, audiobooks are not cheap. They are not cheap to make. Like,
my understanding is that if you get a quality person, it's like 150 or $200 per finished hour that you're paying them. Is that about right as far as the rates go, or is it even higher than that?
Oh, it can go way higher. It can go way higher. Yeah.
And that's all on you up front. Like,
up front.
That's pure risk, and you're hoping that the book sells, and then later on you get to keep more of the profit, and then that was a one-time fee, but that's their money, that's gone.
Yeah. I would say, from my experience, and I'm one of those guys, like, I'm my family's middle class. I mean, we own a home and everything. People think you have to be rich to own a home now, which is not true. But
you live in the Midwest. Like, I'm in Illinois, so in the Midwest,
you're right next door. Okay, yeah. So, we're doing okay, but like not enough that I can drop whatever amount of money I want. So anytime I do stuff, whether it's looking for an editor, artist, or narrator, I do a lot of research to get the best bang for my buck. Yeah. And unless you're going to do the audiobook yourself, and you think you're good enough to read it with yourself, which 99% of you are not. I mean, like, people say, oh, you make good voices, Joe. I'm like, yeah, but I don't believe in myself enough that I think I could actually do this. Okay. I'm not an actor, right?
I've listened to audiobooks with poor narrators, and it ruins it. My kids were listening to Percy Jackson, and it's got a narrator. This is an older book, and they're like, it almost is like, I don't want to listen to this book because the narrator is terrible.
Oh, it is Percy Jackson. I've heard people say that was
makes
terrible.
A huge difference. You got to get a good narrator, and you're absolutely right. People think, oh, I can read. No, you cannot. No, it's a special skill.
I mean, and I had a guy that was telling me, he's like, yeah, you could do it, man. You could do it. It's like, you could go to this place and they'll charge you this much. I'm like, yeah, for how many retakes and stuff I would have to do for them to make it sound good, I might as well just go get a professional, because it's like, because they charge like $50 an hour for a cheap booth, and I'm like, it will be very hard. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'd be very hard to find a good narrator that people will want to listen to for under $85 an hour. I mean, that's low. I had a guy who I thought was great, but he was wanting like $250 an hour, and I'm like, I ain't got that kind of money.
That'll make you want to write short books right there. That'll keep your page limit down. You're like, let me cut something.
Yeah, I try to. I mean, I can't imagine what like R.C. Bray is probably making. He's one of the big time guys, or like people that do the Wheel of Time. I mean, they're probably making $400, $500 an hour, and then a 50-hour book. They're probably like, one book and I'm done for the year.
Exactly. Well, and the two people that read the Wheel of Time was Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. and they work with Sanderson to this day. And of course, he writes like, I don't know, a book a month or some stupid crap. Like that guy can't stop writing. So they have guaranteed job security at a high rate forever. Those two are set for life.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously you know of BookTube. Are you familiar with Daniel Green?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, he's probably the biggest booktuber on the planet. So, he's making some decent money, but he got them to do his audiobooks, his first 2 audiobooks. And I'm just like, yeah, I wonder how much that, that probably cost him like 10 grand or whatever those books were really short, but I'm just like, knowing how much it costs. And I mean, I personally know people who have spent, upwards of $3,000 just on their cover art. And I'm just like, it is not cheap to be an author if you want to do it right. I mean, it's
no. But like you were saying in your marketing video, like you kind of need, like, it's a tough spot to be in. It's very difficult nowadays to be a up and coming author. It's that takes money to make money line, because you're absolutely right. You do need a good cover artist. You do need good audio quality. You do need a good editor, and this stuff's not cheap. And I can imagine it's very difficult to get started. Now with the Audible, again, as an uninformed consumer, my feeling is, since Audible has basically just exploded the audiobook market, and it's just, I mean, exponentially orders of magnitude bigger than it ever was before they came onto the game. Do you feel that larger market makes up for the fact that they are essentially robbing you on that split? Or is it still not worth it? I mean, is it such a big cut that even though you might be selling more books and more copies, it's still not enough, because they're taking upwards of 75% if you're not exclusive? What has been your experience on that end?
Oh yeah. I would say it's, and me and my fellow self-pub authors will talk about this. It's unless you have built a big following, it's still, there's a guy, I don't know if you've heard of him. His name's Will White. He Cradle series, right?
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he is still exclusive to Amazon. He is in Kindle Unlimited. Because if you're, you get to keep 70% of your ebooks, and then it's like 60% of your paperback and hardcovers. And they are, I think at this moment, book wise, not, although Audible's probably about the same. Amazon is 70 to 75% of the market in total. So it's it's ridiculous. Like, okay, if I don't go exclusive, I only get it. They drop it way down. They drop it to like 35% if you're not exclusive with them. So if you're not making a ton of sales, like in Barnes and Noble or on iTunes, if you're not making a ton of sales over there, it's almost like, yeah, you just gotta kind of suck it up. In a way, I feel like their the actual book sales percentages are pretty reasonable. Like I'm cool with 60 to 70%. I'm kind of cool with that. But yeah, it's a little bit more frustrating with Audible, specifically because a lot of times you have no idea how much money you're making. You really have to wait until they give you the spreadsheet at the end of the month. And then it's a weird looking thing, because they have different, it's not just like, here are your sales, here's how much we made, here's how much we're giving you. There is like 4 blocks. There's something called like AL units, ALS units, and then another type of unit. And each one of them will pay you differently. So like I've made as high as like 50% for one, and then under 30%, or less for another. And it equals out to normally about 40%, but like none of it makes any sense. It's so confusing. And like, if you're not like, hopefully I'll have it dialed in to know what it means after a while. But even doing it for, audiobooks for the last year, I'm still confused on like what all these units mean. Do I get paid more or less. I assume, my guess, I don't think it should matter, but my guess is if you come out of pocket, I make more money off of that. Whether if you use if you use your monthly thing, I probably make less, but I do make more money off of an audiobook than I do a book. But I could make more on my books if I wanted to raise the price on them, but I want to keep my stuff reasonable. Like
Sure.
for my paperbacks, I charge $11.99, and
Right.
most of my books are around 300 pages. My hardcovers are $20, but I make about the same for all three: ebook, paperback, and hardcover. I make about, I don't know what it is because they change it every so often, but it's like $275, $280 a book. I could raise those up, but I don't want to be that guy who's like, yeah, you're gonna give me $20 for a paperback of a 300-page book. You know, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
You know, but I have seen some self-pub people who, like, I know they're selling about what I'm selling and they're charging that much, and I'm just like, I feel like you're gouging people a little bit. But then also,
well, and you have to wonder what their sales are like, because at a certain point you're going to price yourself out. You know, especially if you're a self-published newer author, like you almost have to. You know, it's almost like a dues pay. Like, I'm going to keep these cheap now, get my name out there, and then later on when I'm more famous, then okay, we can talk about raising those prices. You know,
and there was a guy. One of my favorite sci-fi authors, Craig Allenson. He was the same way. He started off as self-pub, and then like he's still self-pub, but his audiobooks are through like Podium, through the big. They do the audiobooks. But on his last book, which was I think it was Fallout, he took his book off of Kindle Unlimited. And some people were all mad about it. Like, he wasn't charging a lot for the ebook, but now the ebook's not included in Kindle Unlimited, so you have to buy it. I'm like, guys, he's giving you 15 books. Give him the $4. You know, give him the $4 for the last book in the series that you guys have been reading for 10 years now. You know?
Yeah.
But
so I would think with Audible, I'm so surprised that there's so many columns, because I would assume that there would be, here's your split because somebody bought your book for full price, and then here's your split because somebody used a credit.
Yeah.
And I always wondered how that, like you said, with like bigger books like Sanderson books, they're $50, but then I can buy one for $15.
$15, yeah.
I've always wondered, like, does Audible take a bath on that? Or is that why they're doing this stupid like 75, 25, 60, 40 split? Because it makes up for their losses on that difference between the list price and the credit price. What do they do? Like, because I buy those credit packs all the time. So I'm, you know, and I have a 2 credit a month plan. So at most I pay like $11 or $12 a credit. So yeah, is the 60-40 split, or is that of the credit, or is that of your retail price? But you're saying it's even more complicated than I thought it was, which is it feels like that's leaving a lot of room for them to cheat you, because how would you know? You know what I mean?
Do you want me to put another layer on top of it?
Go ahead. I'm already confused. It can't get worse.
We don't get to set the price
of the audiobook.
Nope. Have nothing. Not allowed to make any decisions on what the price is.
How? It's your product.
I have been told, like, before I came into it, when I first started diving into it, I was like, okay, so how much am I going to sell these for? I'm trying to calculate how much I spent, how many will I need to sell to recoup, and then I started reading it, and it's like, no, you don't get to decide, and they decide based on how long your book is. So if your book cracks 10, like it's like 1 hour to 3 is something, and then 4 to 9:59, and then everyone's like, you got to try to get your book over 10 hours, because once it goes over 10, but so I go on different, I'll go on my laptop here, then I'll look on my phone and I'll check the price of my audiobook, and the prices varies. Like they get, and they don't even tell me if they change the price on my audiobook. Like, so it is so crazy. Like, and I wonder, I'm like, okay, so are you giving me the same price across the board? And like, you're taking a bath sometimes, but you're making more other times on it.
Right.
You know,
it would not shock me. I made the one video and I started dipping into it, and I wasn't sure where to go. So I was kind of on both sides of the fence with Audible and authors and stuff. And some people told me to read a few other things, and it sounds like it's a lot more scummy than it looks like on the surface. And it would not surprise me if they faced a lawsuit or even like a monopoly charge, because they have grown the market so large that at this point they really don't have any competitors, and they would be at risk of kind of being considered a monopoly on that market and then taking advantage of the authors because of it. It would be interesting to see that happen and get those numbers kind of aired out in the light of day for people to really see what they're charging and what they're taking and how that all works. Because anytime you have that many layers of secrecy and confusion, you just know that there's a lot of cheating. There has to be a lot of cheating going on. They're nickel and diming you to get that extra profit, and that sucks.
Yeah. Well, I feel like Audible, especially since we don't get to set the price, it's kind of like, well, like, I don't know how familiar you are with just Amazon as a company as a whole, but for the majority of their history, the first 10, maybe 12 years, they made no money.
Yeah.
What they did is like, we'll just make it easy for everybody to use. We'll make everything as cheap as we can on the site. And then eventually when we have enough people that just come here because it's easy to get stuff, then we can start either raising prices or taking competitors out of the market. And we're the only game left in town. And now we're worth more than every other company on earth because there's nowhere else to shop almost.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the way it's more that way with Audible, because really I wish they would just make it easier for me to know how much I'm making and at least give me a 50-50 split, but it's not worth not being on Audible at this point until something is done, or Spotify becomes big enough, it's just not worth not putting your book on there, and then, or taking the 35% hit if you're not exclusive.
Well, and that's what I remember seeing Daniel Green talk about, that where he was like, I was going to, I looked around, I didn't want to be exclusive with them. I did want to diversify and make sure I was available everywhere. And he was like, a lot of the companies that I went to publish or to get the audio or whatever, they basically just said, oh yeah, we're going to use ACX for you. So he's like, well then, okay, so not only are you a middleman, but you're going to use the company that I'm trying to avoid. And he said he shopped around and it was multiple agencies, and they were like, yeah, we pretty much are just going to funnel you to Audible. And it's like, well then why am I even going to work with you if you're just going to end up putting me into the machine anyway? And then he said he eventually just gave up and was like, well, can't beat him, join him. And I know he was upset about it, and I hate that for him. And I hate it for you guys that like just feel like, well, I have to be exclusive. And they kind of have taken over, and even what you think are third-party agencies are just going to lead you back to them anyway.
Yeah, I watched that whole video of him talking about it, and and he was he basically said nobody was willing to work with him unless they were able to push I think it's Neon Ghost, it was his new one, to Audible. They're like, we have to, or we won't make money off of it. And like, we're not a charity, right? So I don't know if he's going to try with this next one and try to do the Sanderson thing. But, honestly, Sanderson, you have to be at that megastar level and Sanderson has his own infrastructure with was it Steel Dragon is his company?
Dragon Steel Publishing.
Dragon Steel. So he has his own he's got his traditional company, that he has to make books for, but then he also has, the Dragon Steel, and like yourself, you were like, I was gonna get the book, so I'm gonna go get the book where the book is, because I'm loyal to the author, so wherever he puts his stuff, I'll go get it,
but I think he's been writing books for 15 years to get to that point
level.
And I understand when authors are like, okay, but the rest of us can't do that. Like, he's the only one. He and Stephen King are the only ones that can just whip it
Do
out.
whatever
Go,
they
well,
want.
I'm going to put my book where I want to, and you're all going to come buy it where I say, and screw Audible. Like, they have the FU money to say that, and that's cool for them. But then what does everybody else do?
And I remember when he had that Kickstarter going, like everybody was like, this is going to change everything. And I'm like, and my thought was, and how we kind of talked about Jim Butcher at the beginning of the video, it's like, it'll change for people who are megastars at the end of their contracts. Because the reason I never even attempted to go traditional is because I had done research, and a lot of times when you first go traditional publish, it may take 3 or 4 years for them to get your book on the shelf. I mean, like I know a guy, and he got it done in 2 years, and they were like, we got this done real fast for you. Like, that's fast. And I'm like, I'm not waiting 2 years, 3 years to put my book out, So, but yeah, and a lot of times I've heard that they'll lock you into like a 7-year deal. So yeah, if you're a megastar and you're at the end of that 7-year deal where they don't have the rights to your stuff anymore, then you can be like, yeah, I'm going self-pub. I'll go on Kickstarter and I'll get a couple $1,000,000 and I can make my own company and whatever. But for your average everyday person, it's like, that's you're still in the machine, traditional or Amazon machine, and it's gonna until and I had a lot of people when we were talking about Cradle, and people are like, well, it would be cool to hit it big, and then what'll happen is a traditional publisher will come over and be like, hey, we'll give you a deal now that you're selling books. And it's like, why would I do that? Like, Will White's not going to do that. He's selling 100,000 books every time he pops one off. Like, he doesn't need you, unless he just gets overwhelmed. But he makes so much money. His sister and brother work for him, Yeah.
I'm so sad that Spotify didn't really capitalize on that whole situation with Sanderson, because he basically handed them like 100,000 customers. Pretty much just was like, here you go. I'm going to funnel all these people your way. And it seems like they didn't really do anything to capitalize on that and become more of an audiobook, ebook seller at all. They were just like, oh, cool. Thanks for sending those people to us. We're not really going to do anything with that. And it's like, man, that was your lead off moment right there. That was your opening salvo to take on Audible. It just feels like they didn't really do anything with it at all.
Yeah, they should have done what they did with podcasts, where they started signing big exclusive deals. They should have been like, all right, Sanderson, all your stuff, we'll pay you a lump sum as the publisher, and then start going out and getting these guys like Stephen King and some of these other guys and be like, hey, we'll pay you exclusive rights, and then we'll be the home of Sanderson, the home of Stormlight Archive, and all that. But I mean, they did, like I said, they did go out and buy Find Away Voices, but who knows how long that takes to get integrated, and whether or not what direction they want to go. But I know you wanted to kind of keep it around an hour and a half. But tell people what you got going on, where they can find you, and so they can give them something to look forward to.
You can find me at Greg Owen. I'm going to do this, but I want to ask you one more question. Something I want to ask you about before we get off back to the Hollywood thing. But you can find me at Greg Owen, and I do entertainment and social commentary, mostly movies and TVs, but you'll find some book stuff and some video game stuff, and a little bit of life advice, and with the dad energy that I like to bring to the videos.
That's right.
So come on over and hang out. But let me ask you, because I saw you review Dune the other day, I am interested in your thoughts on the movie adaptation that Denis Villeneuve did and the upcoming one this fall. Are you excited about that? Did you like the first part? What was your thought on that?
Okay. This is great that you would ask me this. It is great that you would ask me this, because I had never, read the book until like last month.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to watch the movie until I'd read the book. So I just did that last month, and I just finished the the movie today. Like I started the movie a couple of days ago, and it's it's a 2 hour and 40-minute movie or something like that.
Oh yeah.
So I wasn't able to finish it. And I finished the last like 20 minutes. And again, we can talk about like Daniel Green was like, when it first came out, he was like, this is the greatest living director who doing movies of ever. And I'm just like, and when he said that, I was like, because I grew up a movie guy. Like I wasn't a big reader as a kid. I was the kid that didn't go to parties, didn't do any of that. I just went to the theater. That's all I did. But yeah, so I was like, it's the greatest living author. Like what has he done? And I was like looking at it, I was like, okay, they were good movies. So then I started watching. I finished the book, and I was like, I can see, I didn't think it was the greatest book ever, like some people, but I did enjoy the book, and I thought the world was the coolest part of the book. And then I started watching the movie, and I mean, me personally, I mean, I would rank it as a good movie. Like it was probably, for me, it was like a 7 out of 10, movie, but I can be kind of harsh on movies. So that's a good movie. It was a bit slow, but I know they happen to split this, it's a big book, and they have done a really good job of putting the visuals that I had reading the book pretty much match what they're putting on screen, which I was very impressed with. I was like, I'm like, the whole the shield fighting. I'm like, that's exactly how I saw it in my head.
It looks very good.
Yeah, the worms and the spice and all that. I mean, dead on. But like there were some I don't know, super artsy slow parts to the movie where it's like, this is probably not a movie that's gonna make this monstrous amount of money. Because you're not gonna have anybody under the age of 13 that's going to be able to follow this movie at all. Like it's going to be so slow, kind of gloomy, but I mean, I enjoyed it. I actually think that the second part is going to be better than the first part. Because you're going to really start, because they didn't really show some of the weird stuff that is actually in the book. Because at the end of the movie, spoilers for anyone who hasn't, watched this movie, but they're carrying the body of the guy, the kid killed in battle.
Right.
So I'm like, well, that's not exactly how they did that. They drained his body of moisture in the book. Right. Straight up, it was morbid. So I don't know if they're going to show that in the next portion, or they're just going to kind of sweep the really weird stuff under the rug. Yeah. But if you got time, were you surprised that they actually got greenlit for the second movie, seeing as how I don't think it made a profit at all. Or if it did, it was.
I'm not sure if it did. I doubt it. But I think that, let me look that up real quick.
Because I feel like maybe it got close, and then they just decided, well, if we didn't have the pandemic to deal with, the second movie is going to be a monster hit, is what I'm thinking that they're hoping, since the pandemic's
So
gone.
I'm actually kind of surprised. It looks like they did it on a 165 budget, and it earned $400 million. So that's pretty close.
They 2 to 2.5 times normally.
Yeah, about 2.5, because they had the marketing in there and stuff. So they might have lost a tiny bit, or and I'm sure there were some toys they sold and some licensing, and I bet they probably came out pretty close to even on that. But I would imagine that when it was greenlit, I would bet they got part 1 and part 2. I doubt that they were like, well, we'll see how part 1 goes, and then if it doesn't work, we're just not gonna. I got the impression they were already working on part 2, and they knew they couldn't fit it all in one movie, so they knew they were gonna make 2 parts right from the jump, and I think that got approved from the jump as well.
Yeah, I mean, seeing as how in the title it's part 1 at the bottom, you're like,
yeah,
well, you guys are confident, but that's the hard thing about like the last Mission Impossible movie. It had a budget of 290, and I'm like, I hope that's for both movies. I hope
Right?
you're splitting that, because if you're not, you just took a major L.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, I was talking about this the other day with some other guys on a stream, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was like the Barbenheimer anticipation that overwhelmed this, overshadowed it. I don't know if it was just the part one that people were like, I'll wait until part two comes out. And, I'm not going to go see, part one of a movie knowing that I'm not going to get any closure. And that was actually something that I felt, I didn't like where they ended part one of Dune. I felt that, like you said, there were too many. I would agree with you. Like the 7 out of 10, I thought was like, it was a good movie. I'm not going to crap on it, but I also thought that it was it focused too much on the visual spectacle and not enough on the ideas and the themes and the really meaty, cool stuff that makes that like a sci-fi classic that, here we are 60 years later and people are still talking about this book.
Yeah.
And there's a reason. It's not just because it was a cool sci-fi book. It was because it was deep and it resonates with people and it has really cool, complex themes. And I don't feel like that was really looked at enough. And I also think that they just try to put too much in it. In my head, I thought they would pretty much do the taking over of the planet and getting settled, and then the rising action of the movie is going to be the invasion. The Harkonnen come in, they're invading. It looks like they've won. That's the big climax of the movie, is this big battle and everybody's running. And then at the very end of the movie, we see, nope, Paul and Jessica survived and they're walking off into the desert. I felt like that was going to be a good spot to land it.
Perfect.
But then they're like, nah, we're going to tell some more stuff for a while.
I think they went about 25 minutes too long. Yeah. I agree 100% with you. They could have ended it like, okay, they lost the battle. What's going to happen now? Not like they lost the battle and then we'll show him meeting the tribes out. You could have saved all of that, to the second movie. I mean, unless they're going to make the second movie 3 hours too. It's like,
and it's a tough book to adapt because, I mean, you just read it, it's dense. There's a lot happening. There are a ton of characters. I think they didn't even introduce some of them in this book. Like they didn't introduce the Harkonnen cousin, Fade Routha. They didn't, he wasn't, I think he's gonna be in part two. I'm not even fully confident. They might have just cut him out to save time. I don't know.
Like the last 2 minutes they showed the writer, the worm writer, right? They're like, we just got to throw that in so it looks cool and you'll want to go see the movie.
It's real. But I was with you. I thought that I didn't feel like it was deep enough. I thought it was too visual, but the visual stuff did agree. The ornithopter, I was like, that's cool. I love that representation of it. The way they portrayed the desert planet and the suits and the shield and how they did the dagger fighting and all of it was this is one of those ones where I feel like was a great adaptation because Villeneuve, you can tell he loves this book. You can tell he loves this story. And he was not like, I'm going to make Denny's version of Dune. I'm going to make the best adaptation of this book that I can bring to screen. I believe he was quoted as saying, he was like, I made the movie that I'm a fan of this book. And I made the movie that I want to see as a fan, not the story that I want to tell as a fan who has some ideas that I think would make the story better. So I think that that's a great example to hold up of this is what an adaptation should look like. Maybe it misses the mark on a few things because anytime you bring a book to screen, you're going to have to change some things. You're going to have to cut some things. You lose Tom Bombadil, you lose the narrator voice that is in every book. You lose that stuff. But I felt like he got as close as he could in the medium that he was using. And I respect that a lot, even if I had nitpicks about it. And I will with part two as well. But I think that is important to say that he tried. He did a good job,
Yeah, well, I mean, and I always say it's an 80-20 rule. You got to keep 80% of what the video game, book, or whatever it was, and then there's 20% that you're going to have to tweak to make it work.
You do.
But if you keep that 80% true, you're going to get the hardcore fans out there, and they're going to fight for you. They're going to be like, "This is our movie. This is our TV show." You know,
Yeah.
the big one I'm worried about is Netflix and BioShock. I mean, they announced that they're doing the BioShock, and to me, BioShock 1 is the greatest written video game of all time.
It's
I
so
mean,
fabulous.
the writing.
The twist I didn't see coming. I was blown away by that, and I mean, I like put my controller down. I just wow,
Dude,
wow.
yeah, it's so funny. Like, you know, those videos, like, what's a flex in your industry? Well, my first job was working at Movie Gallery. I don't know if you remember Movie Gallery, right?
No,
It
we
was
had Blockbuster.
It was like number 2 to Blockbuster. We would get video games and movies 6 days before they came out. I beat BioShock before it hit the market. I was telling everybody about this game. I'm like, your head's gonna explode when you get to the end of this game. You're not gonna believe it.
Oh, it was amazing.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean, that's what I'm worried about. But yeah, hopefully some of these people are out here watching your videos, and they can learn how not to screw up stuff. And sometimes it's okay to have fun, like the Mario movie. Just give the fans what they want sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't have to be deep. It's not required to be this groundbreaking Stanley Kubrick epic. You know, it can just be entertaining, and that's fine too. Just please give us one or the other, and leave your ego at the door.
Yeah, don't be Thor: Love and Thunder and not know which way you want your movie to go.
You're just
be
there
dark or be funny. Don't try to be both.
Right. All right. Well, I gotta go cook some dinner for these kids. It is breakfast night every Friday, so I gotta go griddle up some pancakes and some sausages. Let's do this again.
Hey, absolutely, man. Anytime. And I don't know if you're doing streams, but I always tell people, if you need somebody to fill time, I'm your guy. You know, movies, books, whatever. I like to talk about it all.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, guys. Everybody, thank you for watching, and be more than human.
Thank you so much for having me on.